Last week I had an opportunity to go into one of your classes, and as your mentor, you had asked me to do that before.
Right.
So ahead of time, we identified what you wanted to look at, what you wanted to focus on. So you asked me to focus on management and your pacing.
Yes.
Okay. So as far as those two areas, how did you feel those two areas went in that lesson?
For that particular lesson, it was, planning. You always plan a lot better than it actually goes, and I think it goes hand in hand because, I planned out the lesson plan to have multiple ways to approach a subject, but if management gets in, classroom management had to take more time to get the class back in order, then the pacing kind of goes out the window. You don't get to what you want to get to or have enough time to, really bring everything to a full circle.
Absolutely. And I think as a new teacher, that's so great that you already noticed that those two are so related, because if the management is taking time, obviously the pacing is going to be affected. And as far as the flow of your lesson and how you planned it, how did you feel that worked as far as your objective? What was your objective for that lesson?
The objective was for students to experience that there are different ways to learn a song, to write down a song. So ultimately, they were to create a Venn diagram in small groups about, notation with the lines and spaces, and solfege and learning by rote, which is how they've normally learned.
And that's with the hand motions?
Yes, that's with the hand motions. So they know, doing so mi so, or I would sing something and then they'll repeat it back. So really they've learned 3 different ways how to find a song, but we're really starting to introduce the notation, the lines and spaces. And I was trying to get them to see the benefits of having music notation written out, because we're moving on to recorders in 2 weeks. So they needed to get, it's a primer.
Right. Do you feel like they were able to make that connection and to see how they're alike and how they're different?
Definitely at least half of them. You know what? You can't expect full, like 100% acknowledgement in such short of a time.
Right.
But half of them, when they were writing, like, they made the connection, they were able to show me through the Venn diagram or through discussion.
Right. I noticed when I was walking around a lot of like, and they really did seem to make that connection and see how they were alike and how they were different. So that was, I think, very exciting. As far as the timing went, how do you think that went?
I thought it dragged. I think I was just distracted with, we have to get to the next thing, keep going, that it felt artificial, the pacing. I've been getting better with pacing and having to just go a natural flow from one thing to the next, but this lesson was it was rocky getting them organized or to the level of understanding to move on to the next step.
Right. And I think that, we've talked about this before, but the physical environment in your classroom,
Yes.
How is that a challenge?
Well, because I work in a computer lab. I'm a music teacher working in a computer lab. So that, there's physical challenges where kids just cannot walk through to get to where they're seated. They're practically climbing over each other, but they're also, nobody's facing forward. We don't have this real community format. Everyone's at their own station, even though we're not using the computers. And they're third graders, and there's computers in front of them, whether they're on or off. That's a big issue. And we also have it's an inclusive class where we have 9 or 10 special needs students that come in for this particular class, which aren't normally with this 3rd grade class, which first of all bumps up the attendance. So there's even more kids in there, and they also have some different accommodations that we might need to make, but they are also quite distracted by computers or by each other, and which also makes the mainstream students a bit distracted as well.
Right. Now, I know that you get to teach, since this was a 3rd grade lesson, you taught it a few times after. Did you change it in any way?
Yes, I did. I did a lot more modeling. This was actually the second the second of 4 times I've taught the same lesson. The first lesson I tried, it's a different group of kids. We did it all as a group instead of working into small groups. I felt that there wasn't enough student participation with each other. It was just, one or two kids answering all the questions. And then how I changed it for the next groups, I kind of went back to the group format, but it was a lot more going in between, going from the small groups to the large groups, and from the small groups to the large group. Talking about, they already had their Venn diagrams in front of them. Write that little bit down now. Like, as a group, everyone would write it down, and then they would try to find something on the opposite spectrum. So if we wrote down one thing for notation, think about, well, how do you learn that for solfege?
Oh, I like that.
So then it was more guided filling out, and then they could fill out some more of their own.
Oh, that's nice. So you scaffolded it more into like different categories. Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that. That would be great. Do you want? I want to go through this a little bit with you because I think it's kind of valuable. Mm-hmm. And there were certain things that I noticed that I think that you'll notice too that you will think is valuable. What I did was I actually. This is called selective verbatim, so I just wrote down, like I said, the things that you wanted me to focus on. So when they came in at 11:59.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, no, that's my second page. I'm sorry, 11:52, because that period starts at 11:50. So the students entered, and you, as far as management, you used a different clapping pattern to get their attention. Do you use that with all your classes?
Yes.
So they're very accustomed to that. Okay, great. And then you let them have a chance to be sort of the teacher and to get the students' attention. But that went from 11:52 when they came in until 11:59.
Okay.
So that took about like 6 minutes. And I know that you were really engaging them and giving them an opportunity to do that, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, did it feel like you took
it
that
felt
long?
Like it took a very long time.
Okay.
It certainly did. I think it was possibly because I was being observed.
Right, of
even
course.
More. I know that she's looking for management, so the management just like, okay, no one's volunteering, or they were taking a longer time trying to. You don't want to say, well, you got it wrong. You've ended. Of course. You clapped for a minute and a half now, and it's when I wanted 4 beats. Now, to reinforce things like that, it's going to take time to do. The adding on, having the kids do solos, they've just started doing.
Okay.
Working by themselves instead of just echoing. They've just started the leading portion of it. So I think part of that, some of them were excited about it. Some of them had no idea what was going on.
Right, because it's something new.
Yes.
Okay, so that's interesting to me, because when you think of the period only being about 45 minutes, to spend like 6 minutes just on the attention gathering, I thought that was kind of interesting, and I didn't know if you had noticed that. And then you got started on your lesson. I noticed that you have a procedure of writing the student's name down. So could you explain that to me? How does that work?
Sure. Well, when I first started teaching, I was trying multiple ways to get the classroom management down, and then finally I took an entire week's worth of classes and went over procedures for every single class. That, their first morning, get your name written down, next you get a check, then you get, a note home, and it's kind of evolved now that your name's down on the board, it's your warning, check is your second warning, and your participation grade will go down. If you get a second check, you have a detention.
Okay.
So it, I think, and I think what's really helping is that I'm following through with it. So important. So the bad part is, I have multiple children in my room at 7 o'clock in the morning, but it's being consistent, and they know it now. So that will get them less likely to get that second check once they've gotten the 2 warnings.
Yeah, no, the consistency is so important, and the follow through.
Yep.
And then you also had something with happy faces too. Is that like for a group?
That's the class.
Okay.
So we had the individual discipline strategies, consequences, and then we have the rewards, and it goes by the class. For every good point you get, there's like a T chart. You have good points and bad points as a class. If the class as a group is not listening or participating, they'll receive 1 sad point. You take the good points minus the sad points, and that is the amount of prizes I'll raffle off at the end of the day.
Oh,
So usually
wow.
I'll raffle off. It's unfortunately usually 0, but 1 or 2, and I have lollipops or silly bands or something.
Right.
And I just pick a random number from a random number generator on the computer, line it up to whatever number
that's
in
cute.
attendance. So, and I always keep track, and I make sure that it's not the same person getting picked every week, but it's one way to they have something to look forward to at the end of the class, and that takes
Right.
30 seconds if they have it. So it's usually
Right.
after they're lined up, I'll just quickly.
Right. Okay, that sounds great. And then you went through 11:59. Now I have a challenge for you. You talked to them about the
Mhm.
different types of notes, the whole, the half, the quarter. Then you practiced clapping. And at 12:10, you asked a great reflective question. What part was hard?
Mhm.
What part was easy? Was that any part of that? Was that interesting to you? What the kids said? Do you remember what they said?
Well, what I was looking for was the song itself has a second ending. Everything is the same except for one note.
Right.
So, and also knowing, the rhythmic notes. I was just trying to see if they could if they knew or were aware of what they were doing instead of just echoing.
Of course.
Because one thing is 8th notes. It's said a lot quicker, and it's also, you're putting together these rhythms and the hand patterns, which they do, but they haven't seen it up on the board yet.
Oh.
So it was seeing if
that was the first time.
Yeah,
for
it
them
was-
in that. Okay.
Yeah, first or second, but it's the first time they actually were really focusing on that idea. So I was just trying to see if they were paying attention. Really.
Right, and understanding. Let's see, then 12:12, you had to stop. You said there's too much talking today. There's lots of side conversations. And then a girl came up to you and you were writing on a pink paper. Was that for a nurse?
That's the task. She had to go to the nurse.
Okay. So that took about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Then you were working on the trampin' song.
Mhm.
You asked them what was the same or different. At that point, you had to give Anaya detention because she was acting inappropriately. And then at 12:20, you asked them to get into groups of 4. And you displayed the Venn diagram and gave them instructions for that. And then, so now you're saying that the next time you did that lesson, you did more modeling at that point.
Yeah. So they were in their groups, they had the Venn diagrams with them, and I had the Venn diagram up on the board. And we were, we filled out a couple points on each together and then encouraged them to think of
What else?
What
right. Okay, great. 12:20, you clapped for attention again. You talked to them about how you had learned this song 2 different ways. We saw the words written out and we saw the notes on the staff. And we are going to have a debate about which one is better. So you really were giving them a purpose, for why they needed to pay attention to how they're alike and how they're different. And then at 12:25, each group will have 3 minutes and then we'll come back and present. At that point, the end of the period was coming.
Yep.
So at 12:30, you told them to go back to your seats, and you did a countdown: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, freeze. Show me you're ready. And then you were able to go around and have a few of the groups to share. And then it was basically, the lesson was over because it was time to go. And you collected everything and told them that they had their homework to do tomorrow.